just a little more of a just talking about our time here and our goals here. And I didn't really mean to, but I've just every year felt like, man, I just need to talk about being here. Like it's just kind of something that always seems to be on my heart when it comes around to being here another year. And we've had some really good times. I know that we've had so many times when people have invited us over and for family gatherings and for get-togethers and whatever sort of party or whatever it may be over to their house. And many times we look around and we're like, we're the only people here who are not family, And anyway, that's special because we feel like, we are family, So we've really appreciated that. Also, just people, so many people have taken our children and, gone treasure hunting on the farm and done things of that nature, all sorts of fun stuff, and, just making special memories, just allowing us to go hunting and make those memories. And also, I think that sometimes it's just very simple. Sometimes it's just people here at church, and, you talk to them, and you can just really tell that they're just glad that we have this opportunity to be together and this chance to just worship God together, and just they talk about their enjoyment of being together and just the bond that we share, and it's just it doesn't take doing anything. It just takes sharing that, being together, just that bond of friendship that we have that is just invaluable no matter what we do. But anyway, also, yikes. But we've had some difficult times, and I think really laid some people to rest who were loved like family. Just absolutely some of the most difficult things I've ever done. And that's kind of a little bit what I'm going to talk about today, is that being a shepherd of a church and the responsibility, the relationship you feel with people, and why it's so important, and just kind of that maybe a little glimpse of things from maybe my side of the fence a little bit. But I don't know if it's something I could describe that you would understand. Because I think, before you have children, you have maybe a skewed view of children. I have enough children, I've got a pretty good view of children. But before you have children, you may have a skewed view. You may think, well, yeah, you got to drive them around everywhere, and you got to take care of them, and you love them. But the instant you have a child, you think very different. You're like, wow, a human life that I am responsible for. Like, I will do anything for this child. I love this child, right? All of a sudden, you have an understanding that no one could have told you before, right? Nobody could have explained that to you. No amount of talking could have got that through your thick head, right? And even I've talked to people who have done foster care or adoption, and their mind is blown by the level of care for someone who God has placed in your responsibility. Because it is a human life. It's more than any object, right? And it's something that I don't know if people could really grasp what it is to have God put people in your care who you are responsible for caring for and guiding. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about that today, and just maybe a little bit of a different look at things from maybe my view of shepherding people, shepherding a church. And you may ask yourself, well, what does that have to do with me? Like, how do I benefit from that? And I don't know. But maybe it'll be really beneficial. Maybe you'll be like, oh, that's what you've been babbling about, That's what you're trying to do, Maybe it'll be really insightful. I don't know. But I want to look at just how my goal in seeing the church and my goal in what I'm doing as I'm here and as I'm preaching, as I'm teaching, like what am I trying to do, and what does it mean to me? So here, and once again, I hope this doesn't come across as being all about me or some, I don't know, in some way like, I don't know, centered on me for some weird reason, but I just hope this gives you some a beneficial insight. You know, sometimes you talk about things that are maybe a little bit, you know, your feelings, just as a help for understanding for other people. But it says here in 1 Peter, it says in 5:2, it says, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. And it says, exercising oversight. And it says, not because you have to, but because you want to, as God would have you. That you're doing this for God, for his people, for his souls, these important people. And it says, not greedy for money, but because you care. You're not doing this for money. It boils down to really one reason why you do this, one attitude, one purpose that would drive you to do this. And it has to be very genuine from the heart. It has to be that you actually care about each of the people that God has given you to care for, to look after, to try to bring nutrition to try and bring along, to try and guide, that it cannot be driven by something where you got caught into it, where you needed to take this job, that you needed to do it, that you had to do it, or that it was like this. It has to come from one reason, that it really comes from the heart, that you actually are going to care about these people, just like a child. You wouldn't want someone to care for a child. They may be able to go through the steps, but it's not the right place for them if they don't actually care about that child, right? And this is what God says. He's like, you know, if you're going to shepherd people, it has to be genuine, okay? You have to look at each person and care about each person to bring them along from the right place in your heart. It can't come from any wrong motivations, you know? And I think, too, in general, a shepherd, if you were to think of a shepherd of sheep, it's a job that takes personal interest, that you would guide them in time of drought to find, you know, valleys of shade or valleys of food or nutrition or water or whatever it may be, and you'd spend nights, you'd spend long nights, you'd spend time, you'd spend this personal relationship. And I think in the same way, in guiding people, you're gonna spend time in study, you're gonna spend time looking. I'm gonna be constantly thinking, what is the next thing I can teach? Like, what is the next thing that would provide the nutrition that would help people come along? Like what, I'm not just up here like just picking out something to teach. I'm thinking, what is it that's going to make the difference in people's lives? Like, what is it that I can present to you that's going to make a difference, that's going to bring people to a walk with the Lord? Like, in a personal, caring, thoughtful process, like, how am I going to do that? And it says, not for money, but because you care. And I know when I first went into ministry, I had a financial advisor in Minnesota, and I went to him and I was like, you know, we were contributing X amount to stocks and bonds and what all. And I went to him and I told him, well, we're going to revamp this because I'm quitting this job, so we're just going to have to rethink our future goals. That is number, 4 or 5 in a row I've hit a mic. But anyway, and he said to me, and this is, you know, I found this interesting. His first thought was, he said, oh, if you start a church, that can be an incredibly lucrative business. You can really get a lot of money. And I was like, if that is who you are, that you're there to kind of fleece the sheep, like, oh my goodness, is that ever not what God asks? Is that ever like the worst shepherd you could have? That they're there to try to set themselves up in order to take advantage of the money that may be at hand? That is a messed up view. That is exactly the opposite of what we should try to be. So, you know, and this may be just like a little bit of a sidetrack, and once again, I hope this doesn't come across as you thinking, oh man, he wants us to be to church every single week or something. Like, I don't want to put pressure on you, really, I don't. And I just thought, you know, I think there's a common misconception of why I would want you in church. Like if people thought about it maybe from an outside view and they said, well, why does he want us in church? And maybe an outside view would say, well, that looks great. I mean, the numbers are up. It shows on the board. You know, it's attendance. whatever it may be, or maybe it's like, oh, well, that brings in more money, that just helps out the whole situation. And once again, I hope this doesn't come across as like, I don't know, personal in any reason outside of just maybe understanding. And that is that the way I kind of look at it more is the reason that I would want someone here is because of my responsibility for them. And what I look at it more like cooking, okay? I know nothing about cooking. But I look at it like cooking if I knew what cooking was all about, okay? But if you were to invite someone over, and I generally spend about 25 hours on a lesson, about an hour per minute, and I picture this as cooking a meal, okay? You get vegetables together, and you're cutting them up, you're putting them together, and you put that chicken in the oven, and you're trying to get it golden brown, and I think, and anyway, you're trying to make everything just right, and as you're working and preparing, and you're working, and you're working, and working, and what's on your mind, right? You're thinking of the people coming over, right? And you're thinking, I'm trying to make this, that this would be a blessing to them. That, like, these are my friends, and I'm excited. And as the moment grows closer, I'm excited, like, this is going to be so cool to share together because they're going to see my care. They're going to see what I put into this. And I don't necessarily, once again, I don't want this to turn around as all about me, right? But on that flip side, there is, like, you want them to know that you cared, right? You're putting this meal together and you're like, I'm going to lay it out, and you're decorating the table, you're putting out the plates, you're cleaning, you're getting ready, and then why would you want them there? What is the purpose? And, you know, it's a little bit different in ministry, but, you know, if they called you and they said, oh my goodness, we were up watching a movie last night and we're not going to make it, you'd be like, oh, ooh, ouch, right? Like, why? Why did you want them there? And as far as ministry goes, I feel like what I do is I'm flipping through verses, sorting and digging, and I'm thinking this is going to be helpful, and this will help them understand, and this is going to be good for them, and this will feed them. And I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait to share this with them, and this could help them, and this could grow them, and this could get them the nutrition they need, and maybe this is going to make the difference in their life. Maybe this could push them to this new understanding that then I can build to this understanding, and I'm preparing it for them. And why do I want them there? It's because of each and every individual, right? It's because there is and this kind of again is going to come round full circle to that responsibility for each and every individual. And you know, I think there's two kinds of preachers. And I hope and I trust, I feel like I could say before God in honesty that I fall into the category that I want to fall into. But I think there's two kind of preachers, and one I'll call a Burger King preacher, okay? And the other I will call a preacher who cooks home-cooked food, okay? If you went to a Burger King drive-thru and you ordered a burger, you could easily unwrap it and drop it out the window in the mud puddle, could you not? You'd be like, oh, dude, this guy just dropped a burger in the mud on purpose. Like, you'd be like, give me another one. You give him a few bucks, right? And he's like, oh, okay, here comes another one. You open it, you throw it out the other window. It's like, ha, ha, you know, that's funny, right? This guy's, he's funny, right? But it's very different if someone cooks you a meal, right? It's a whole different thing, right? And I think there's two kinds of people. There's two kinds of preachers. There's one kind of preacher where you might say, and please don't take this wrong, like you have to be at church. I miss church, okay? For things, camping, be it what it may, I understand. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of insight to why people are important and why it's important that you would be here. But there's two kinds of people, and that is that I believe there are preachers who do not care if you show up, because why? You paid them to deliver a message, right? And you're like, whether or not I show up, I paid them. They're there for me, right? Did I not pay him to give a message this morning? But truly to be a shepherd, no one could pay you to give that message. If you were truly a shepherd, if you truly cared, you did it right from the heart. And every verse was chosen with a particular interest. That it was provided and laid out with a heartfelt care for each person who would hear it, with the desire that it was going to make the difference in their life. There's a huge difference in whether or not you're a shepherd or a paid Burger King worker. If I was a paid Burger King worker, I would print off a message and I would read it off to you and I would not care. If you show up, you show up, right? And so there's a big difference. So in verse 3, in the next verse here, it says, not domineering over those in your charge, but be an example to the flock. And I think, have you ever thought of this? Not domineering over those in your charge. Have you ever thought of someone being placed in your charge? That God had placed someone into your care, an entire church of people who God said, Nate, are you willing to take on this group as a responsibility, to care about each and every one of them? Are you willing to do that? Those in your charge? And in Hebrews 13:17, it says, those of whom you will give an account for before God, those of whom you will stand before God and answer for how you raise them, those who you'll stand before God and answer whether or not you let them slip or slide or fall off, or whether you nurtured and cared them and brought them up as you ought to have. Have you ever thought of God saying, Nate, are you willing to take that on? And are you willing to raise up each person that I put in your charge, in your care? Are you willing to take on that responsibility and pour what they need into each and every one of them? And that's a lot different than Burger King. It's a lot different, right? And it's something I wouldn't talk about very often, but maybe, I guess at 4 years is something that I just feel like at least say it once, that I hope that this is why I do everything, right? Because I have a personal care and a personal interest in each person who's been placed in my charge. I think of them as a human living soul who I care about, who I have this hope for their growth, this hope for how they grow in their walk with God, this hope that I could keep them to safety, this hope that on the day that I answer for how I took care of them, that I would say I brought them everything that I could to bring them along the best that I possibly could as human living individuals, that I took a personal interest in those that God had placed in my care. And, I just think, there's one last verse I want to pull up, and this is in 3 John. But in 3 John 1:4, it says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. And John is writing to Gaius, and he's telling him, that he has thrill, that he's looking back on those who he shepherded, and he says, you're still walking with God. And he says, there is not a thing on earth that could bring me as much happiness as what I have just heard. That a child of mine who I shepherded, the church that I shepherded, is walking with God. Why on earth is there nothing humanly imaginable to John that could be more important than hearing that those who he cared for are still walking with God? Why does that matter? Why is that the most important thing that John could ever on the face of this earth hear? And if you have children, you should have a general understanding of this, right? If you have children, you should, I can't imagine, if you knew that your son or daughter would end up overdosed behind a dumpster, you'd weep bitter tears, wouldn't you? And what would bring you more joy than anything on this earth? To hear that they are walking free from the pitfalls of what sin brings upon life, that they are safe, trusting and following after their Lord, that you could say, look at my child who I instilled the right things in, and I would do anything to see that success. That's because John isn't doing this for money. John isn't doing this because he has to. He's doing this because he wants to. He doesn't see them as individuals that he would teach for no particular reason, but he's taken them on as a responsibility, as those who he'll give an account for, as those he'll treat and nurture and care for as if they were his very own flesh and blood. And I just think, I just hope that this kind of gives us somewhat of an understanding to what it is to shepherd a church and what it is to correctly, be on this side of the pulpit, and just a little bit of what that looks like. But, in closing today, there are many times that I look around at people and, maybe in communion time before church, and I just wonder, the thought crosses my mind, do they know how much I care? Do they know what I'm doing? And I think of those who, are kind of on the fence and, maybe they rarely make it, and you just think, I wonder what they think I would go to, what extreme I would reach to get them following the Lord. Like what the value of seeing that soul safely walking with God, I wonder if they could possibly understand. I wonder if they would know that, what it would mean to me, not that they're here a number on the board, but that they're walking with their Lord. I just wonder, could they possibly grasp that understanding? And this goes from my church to my community. Every one of them, everyone that has been placed within my reach, I reach for, like it is my hope and my goal. And I just think, I just think oh man, to say there's no greater joy, I think I could say that if I knew that those who were here were walking closer to God, before God, in all honesty, and I fear God, I could say that is the best thing I could ever hear. That people who I'm trying to guide to God would walk to God. I would, it's the dream, right? It's that those who you're caring for, those that placed in your charge, would make it. It's the greatest goal there is. And I think, maybe just once in a few years or something, maybe you just talk about, maybe it gives you an understanding to know maybe just the view of what it is to shepherd and look after a church and the goals that I set for us and myself. And I hope that's maybe not a message for you, but a message for me. but maybe there's understanding there that's helpful. So we'll close in a word of prayer this morning. Our God and Father, I just pray that you would just be with us. I pray that you would just strengthen us. Lord, there's so many struggles that each of us face and so many hardships that we each endure, Lord. And I know that each person is so vitally important to you that you sent your Son, Jesus Christ, who came out of God, from God, down to earth to take on human flesh and die on that cross to pay for sin in order to offer forgiveness to anyone who will repent and turn to God and receive his love and mercy. And I just pray that you just help us to each be faithful in valuing the lives that you value and caring for those who you care for. And I just pray that you just help us to be faithful, to follow after you, to strive to do what is right. And I just pray that you just guard me, protect me as I try to do what is right without having maybe pride or selfishness or any form of greed could creep up and ruin the work that you have for me to do. And I just pray that you just be with our church. And I just pray this in your Son's name. Amen.